Yes, so I think as we look at that, the other component, of course, with COVID, we tend to worry a lot about cybersecurity. It's also critical for us to look at issues of the architecture. When you think about your network now, you're working with a remote, you're working in a remote environment, you now have to use cloud systems. It's the right time for you to go in, look at your architecture, look at your data classification, find out if it was a network diagram, has it expanded? On the issues of strategy and governance, you all of a sudden you have people working from home. Do you have to provide them with internet? What is the cost of providing them that? So that is an area in terms of risk that we need to look at. Of course, Martin talked about business continuity. There's the aspect again of IT human resources. Some people will be working from home, and now you have people who are sometimes they're working from home, working from different places. You have to look at that and understand in the sense of how then do you address if you don't have enough staff on campus or within your office, how do you go about that? We are seeing an issue of privacy and data protection coming up. We need to ask ourselves when it comes to privacy and data protection, there's all this information that is being now used remotely. You don't know who's accessing those files. You don't know who is able to, again, look at your employees. Maybe they're working from a cafe. It's important to understand that. A very critical component when you think about risk post-COVID is, again, third-party management. Your third parties need to maintain controls that are very similar to your own controls. So those are things we need to look at and appreciate. And then, of course, technology licensing. You'll find that some of the licenses, the way they're structured, they're only allowed to be used when somebody's on premise. What if people are working remotely? So those are some of the aspects, the issue of architecture, your strategy and your governance, your asset management, which assets are coming in and where they're coming from, business continuity, third party, and cybersecurity, as Martin talked. There's a HR component, operations and support, privacy and data protection, and of course, physical and environmental. If people are working from far away from the home, the servers that are in the data center, of course, you should have automated monitoring because you don't have a lot of people in the offices. So there are quite a number of things when you think about the technology risk aspect. And if you don't prepare yourself adequately, then you'll face challenges. But that are just a high-level review of those. Thank you very much, Martin.
Okay, thank you, William. And before you leave, I'd like you to respond to a question from Samantha, who asked what we can recommend as we focus on to ensure that secure third-party connections are being established. I think what she asked in summary is, what should we focus on third-party security?
So the key thing here, you need to understand that as third parties come into your environment, it's very important that they go to the right place. I'll give you a very good example. If you have a plumber coming to your house, it is expected the plumber will go to the toilet, will go to the kitchen. If you have your plumber going to your bedroom or to your safe, then there's a problem. But only you know where that safe is. So it's important we build rules on our network that helps third parties to go wherever they're supposed to go. And in this day and age, without good encryption, without controlled privileged access, it becomes very difficult. So when you think about third-party connections, think about VPN. SSL is good, but VPN is always better because you can track, you can be able to look at what they're doing. You also want to ensure that you're monitoring and you're logging all the connections that are coming in. So if I say I'm coming in from 4 to 5 o'clock, you make sure that that's the time that connection is available and you switch off. We are now seeing organizations implementing two-factor authentication even for third parties, which adds another layer of secure connection as people come into your environment.
Okay, last question for you, William, is there was a question from Leonard who asked, when we talked about vulnerability assessment tools, if you can give a bit of insight on the cost factor and the licensing model for different vulnerability assessment tools that we have.
Okay, so when you think about vulnerability has become very cheap. In a sense, there's quite a number of tools out there that you can be able to pick on and use. If you look at the SANS page, or rather the SANS training resources, they have a full list of vulnerability tools you can use. I don't want to mention tools here, but if you send us an email, we can give you a listing so that you pick some of those. But when you think about it, where we've reached now, there's quite a number of tools that are in the cloud. So if you think about the top players, and I'll talk about some of the top players. If you think about Tenable, Qualys, all these tools have a cloud component that you can be able to use and be able to scan internally. And It's one of those models where, depending on how many IPs you have, you can switch it on, switch it off, sort of like a tap, and you should be able to use that. So it's recommended, of course, you maintain the same tool over a period of time so that you can compare what you saw this quarter versus the next quarter. But it's good to have some continuity again, so that as you change, you're able to refer to the same database. So there's quite a number of tools. There are a lot of cloud systems you can use, so you don't need to get stuck with a tool you don't need. But if you have a huge network, then it makes sense for you to have a perpetual license which you can use. But also, there are a lot of open source tools that we can use, and they're working well. Of course, you need some technical knowledge to be able to use those tools.
Okay, thank you very much, William. I want to ask whether we have any comments from Chris Johnson, Botswana. Okay, as I'm waiting for Chris, I hope we have answered most of the questions that had been shared. I saw Billy ask about whether this was an exhaustive list of remote connection vulnerabilities. These are the top ones that we found from analysis, but we can share some more. I think some of the questions that I'm seeing would be able to respond to you individually. So we've been able to respond to the specific on the question on vulnerability assessment. How do you scan for vulnerabilities and check different weaknesses on your technology? We've talked about, there was a question on cost factor and licensing model. Thanks, William, for handling that. And then there's also a question that has come from Samantha on specific tools for tracking these fraudulent connections. I think we have quite a lot of these different tools, but because of time, I will want that we handle that individually. We can share this feedback with you individually, and feel free to reach out to us and share out any other different questions that you might have. Okay, I don't know whether Chris, you're back. I know he had some connection challenges, but I want to thank everyone. As we're closing, I want to thank everyone for joining us. It's always a privilege to have you, all the different industry players, and discuss these. It's always a privilege to have you, all the different people who joined us from Botswana, from Zambia, from Uganda. We are very grateful. In Swahili, we say asante sana.